All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at a source that pits some of history's greatest thinkers against each other. We're talking about literary and philosophical giants who all took on the biggest questions of life. But, and this is the interesting part, they came up with completely different answers. Let's see what they were really grappling with. So, what in the world connects a dystopian novelist, a couple of Russian spiritualists, and the German philosopher who famously declared God was dead? Well, the source material we're exploring argues they were all tangled up in the same core problems: power, morality, and the tough struggle for human freedom in a really complicated world. And wow, did they disagree. I mean, on one hand, you've got someone like Leo Tolstoy, who argued for a kind of Christian pacifism, this idea that any violence, especially from the state, is just flat out morally wrong. But then, on the complete other side of the spectrum, you have Friedrich Nietzsche. He celebrated what he called the will to power, that basic human drive to be the best you can be, and he saw Christian morality as a system that the weak made up just to hold back the strong. This isn't just a slight difference of opinion. We're talking about a massive clash of worldviews. But here's the thing. Even with those deep, deep divisions, the analysis points out they actually had a lot of common ground. Thinkers like Orwell, Dostoevsky, and even Nietzsche in his own way, were all super critical of oppressive power structures. They were all worried about the individual getting crushed by the system, And they all dug into the moral messes that happen when ideology starts to twist the truth. Now, this is where the source makes a really interesting turn. The conclusion it draws from all this fighting is pretty wild. It says the fact that these geniuses couldn't agree on anything isn't really a failure on their part. Instead, it's proof that human smarts all on their own just aren't enough to figure out ultimate truth. Their contradictions basically show us the ceiling of our own wisdom. So that begs the question, right? If these brilliant minds basically hit a philosophical brick wall, then where are you supposed to turn for answers? The document suggests that maybe we have to look beyond human thinking altogether. And here is the first answer the source puts on the table. It takes a step out of philosophy and right into theology, putting forward the teachings of Jesus Christ as the final word. The argument is basically that while philosophers can debate forever, the gospel offers a simple divine truth that just cuts right through all the noise about power, humility, and freedom. But wait, the analysis doesn't stop there. It brings another person into the mix: Joseph Smith. Now, his teachings aren't presented as a replacement for Christ's. Instead, the source calls it a restoration of the original gospel. The idea is that really important truths got lost over the centuries and had to be brought back. And according to this document, this restoration provides the missing pieces of the puzzle. It's like concepts such as a premortal existence, an eternal plan for us to keep growing, and a totally different way of understanding God's nature. These are presented as direct answers to the exact questions about meaning and suffering that guys like Dostoevsky and Nietzsche were wrestling with. Okay, so here's a really crucial idea, especially when it comes to that age-old problem of evil. The source zooms in on the doctrine of agency. It argues that suffering isn't God's fault or some kind of flaw in the design of the universe. No, it's the natural result of us being able to choose. Because without the real possibility of making bad choices, making good choices wouldn't mean anything. This basically gives us a three-step way to understand pain. First step, choice. The argument is that we actually chose to come here, knowing that suffering would be part of the package. Step two is growth. The idea is that suffering isn't for nothing. It's a process that refines us. And finally, step three, compensation. This is the ultimate promise that any unfair suffering will be completely made right in the end. So, after laying out this whole philosophical and theological case, the document brings it all together in a really powerful visual summary. It sets up a direct comparison, ranking each of these great thinkers on how well they actually clarified life's deepest questions. And this slide right here is where the source's entire argument really snaps into focus. You can see it visually ranks everyone. At the very top, with a perfect score, is Jesus Christ, presented as the gold standard of truth. Just below him is Joseph Smith, and then you have the philosophers we've been talking about: Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Orwell, and Nietzsche, way down at the bottom. Now, the key here, according to the source, isn't about who is smartest. It's a ranking of the clarity and the completeness of the answers they gave to life's biggest questions. Let's just focus on that score for Joseph Smith for a second. 95 out of 100. That's huge. The source justifies this incredibly high ranking by arguing that his teachings, just like Christ's, don't come from human logic.
Instead, they're claimed to be the product of direct divine revelation, which the analysis says provides a complete and coherent worldview that philosophy, with all its contradictions, just can't match.
Okay, let's shift gears, because this document doesn't just leave all this stuff in the past. It connects this entire journey through philosophy and theology to some very specific, very urgent warnings for the world we live in today. The argument is that the exact same struggles over power, truth, and meaning that kept Orwell and Dostoevsky up at night are now playing out on a global scale. And they're fueling some of our most intense modern social and political crises. So the first thing the source points to is a concept it calls identity politics. It's defined here as a political focus that puts group identity above individual identity. And the document argues that this leads to an us versus them mentality. It reduces people to stereotypes, and it encourages a culture of victimhood instead of empowerment.
The second modern idea the source critiques is the push for equality of outcomes. This is defined as the goal of making sure everyone ends up in the same place, no matter how much effort they put in or what talents they have. The document argues this is a really dangerous idea that kills the incentive to work hard, smothers innovation, and ends up requiring huge government overreach to enforce. And according to the source, the dangers of these ideologies are pretty severe. It warns about society becoming more and more polarized, a loss of personal responsibility, and at the end of the day, the slow erosion of our individual freedom as more and more power gets centralized.
And this is where it all comes together. The document brings its entire argument full circle. After looking at the limits of philosophy and the dangers of these modern ideologies, it concludes that the only real solution is to return to the divine truths it claims were revealed through Joseph Smith.
And so that leaves us with this one big, final question that this whole analysis is built around. Is it possible that the key to solving our modern chaos isn't found in some new philosophy, but an ancient revelation? In a world that loves complexity, the source challenges us to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the most profound answer is also the simplest one. Something to think about. Thanks for watching.